was it?
I came out, I had a pretty high-flying job in London. I was getting married to a lady who was a widow at 24, I think, with a baby. Long story there. She was on the Wirral. I was living in Watford. My last job was in the fleet headquarters at Northwood. And basically, we decided that I didn't want to work on the Wirral and she didn't want to work in London or come to those places. So I was happy to resign from. I was doing a public relations job in London.
I was going to ask. You said you had this kind of high flying job, but didn't give any details. So what you were doing, public relations.
Well, for the Navy, and then I got moved into number 10 for a bit.
Oh wow!
Well, Callaghan was the Prime Minister, and he had this bee in his bonnet that we should be training more professional engineers. We call engineers in this country anyone from a garage guy repairing our cars to the guy building a nuclear power station. So Callaghan, that was a big thing for him. He formed a 32-piece committee to put their mind to it. And I was lent from the Ministry of Defence to that committee for a year. Working in central London was not my bag. I was getting married. So I thought, what am I going to do? I saw an old edition of the UK Press Gazette, which is where journalist jobs are advertised. I'd been trained by the Sunday Express, one day a week stuff for the MOD in central London. Went to Northwood because there were 4 press people there. Northwood is a naval base, North London.
Okay.
4 press officers, 2 civilians, 2 naval officers, and three of them went on a Sunday afternoon to Brussels for a conference on the Monday. That aircraft went down the runway at Heathrow straight into the reservoir. So 3 of them were killed. So the Navy said to me, would I do 6 months extra? I was bang at the end of my career. And it suited me and it suited the Navy, and that was good. I was flying around the world, wearing myself out. So yes, we were getting married, didn't have a job, saw an old edition of the UK Press Gazette looking for reporters, ITV in Plymouth. So I went down, did the interview. They gave me the job verbally. And I said, well, they said, when can you start? And I said, well, actually, I've got to move 2 houses, move out my fiance out of a house in the Wirral. I've got to move out of a flat in Watford. I've got to come to the West Country. I've got to find somewhere to live. I wouldn't mind a honeymoon and all that sort of stuff. And stupidly, I said I could do that in 3 weeks. They said, yeah, that's fine. So yes, we did all that, moved 2 houses, got a few days honeymoon in Ibiza. Came back on a Friday, rang them up and said, rented a farm. Rang them up on the Friday and said, where do you want me on Monday? Long story short, they said, well, we've actually had a reorganization and the job doesn't exist.
Oh, my goodness.
So I've got a wife, a baby, a farm in the middle of nowhere, rented, and no job. And I'll be quite honest with you, mentally, I spiraled downwards. I was 30-something. I'm never going to work again, blah, blah, blah. So my new wife was the one that held me together, to be absolutely honest with you. And it took 9 months for me to get work, which was as a harbour master in Cornwall, ace job, 120 applied, and I managed to get it. It's another story, really.
Again, another selection process where you got through.
Yeah.
And so was that so you were based in the West Country, harbour master. Was that your job for quite a while? Was that?
It was actually the worst job I've ever had. I needed to work, and I thought it was running the harbour. It wasn't. It was about car parks, property, leases, all that sort of stuff. The harbour more or less ran itself. So yes, I can't say I enjoyed it, but I desperately needed to work. So I was very happy to have the job. I did start writing a book while I was harbour mastering. And one of these incidents, I call them God incidents, where I met someone who was a printer and he said, well, I'll print it, you sell it. And it really sold quite well off the kitchen table, as all these businesses do. And that developed into a publishing company a few miles away in a place called Liscard. And I ran the publishing company for probably 30 years.
Wow.
But the BBC used to use me as their naval expert. So they used to send me all around the world doing stuff. From the Falklands to Hawaii. That was tough.
So you had the boring day job of being the harbour master,
yes,
to pay the bills. But do you think that kind of maybe opened up the opportunity
Oh,
for you to
yes.
be creative
Yeah.
and maybe take on these media opportunities as
Yes,
well?
just that.
Right.
Just that. So, yeah, I wasn't a full-timer, but, there was all these things going on, and I suppose they didn't have any particular expertise. By then, I'd done 11 years, I think, as a naval officer, so, I could talk intelligently about it.
Wonderful. Well, we're gonna take a break shortly just to round out part one, and then in part two, I'd really like to talk about your more recent years, your work in Gosport, community work, projects that you've had and might be considering at the moment.